Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So good evening again, everyone. So glad you could join us. We're coming to the end of chapter 2 of Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga, a talk delivered in London in 1895. It's so important for us to remember that in June of that year, June of 1895, Swami Vivekananda had his second realization of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This was at Thousand Island Park in the state of New York. And when he returned from that, he was a fountain, an absolute fountain of enthusiasm and wisdom and knowledge. That the talks that he gave in June and July of 1895 are collected in a book called Inspired Talks. And for any of you who feel so inclined, that is a book well worth your attention. It was assembled by Swami Nikhilananda, or maybe it was Adishwarananda. I don't remember whether Nikhilananda was still alive. In any event, of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Society of New York, the East Side Center in New York City. It is a remarkable book. And so in September, in the fall of 1895, Swami Vivekananda was in London. And this is toward the end of the second talk that is collected as Jnana Yoga. Stand up, men and women. Dare to believe in the truth. Dare to practice the truth. The world requires a few hundred bold men and women. Practice that boldness which dares know the truth, which dares show the truth in life, which does not quake before death, nay, welcomes death, makes a man know that he is the spirit, that in the whole universe nothing can kill him. Then you will be free. Then you will know your real soul. This Atman is first to be heard the thoughts about, and then meditated upon. That's a quote from the Upanishads. This Atman is first to be heard, then thought about, and meditated. There's a typo here. This Atman is first to be heard about, then thought about, and then meditated upon. There is a great tendency in modern times to talk too much of work and dreary thought and decry thought. I'm sorry. There's a great tendency in modern times to talk too much of work and decry thought. Doing is very good, but that comes from thinking. Little manifestations of energy through the muscles are called work. But where there is no thought, there will be no work. And of course, what he's alluding to is chapters 3 and 4 of the Gita, where Sri Krishna talks about the nature of work and the fact that all that we do is in a form of work. Fill the brain, therefore, with high thoughts, highest ideals. Place them day and night before you, and out of that will come great work. Talk not about impurity, but say that we are pure. And when the Swami says this is the thing for us to understand. He's not talking theoretically. He's not trying to convince us of something. He's recognizing a fact. He's recognizing a fact. He's simply stating a fact. All our thoughts of impurity are a figment of our left mind. They're part of what we've learned to think about ourselves and our relationship with the world. And that is the only source of impurity, is those thoughts. All the saints tell us that we are innocent, that we are pure. And this is exactly what Swami Vivekananda is telling us. Talk not about impurity, but say that we are pure. We have hypnotized ourselves into this thought that we are little, that we are born, and that we are going to die, and into a constant state of fear. There is a story about a lioness who was big with young, going about in search of prey, and seeing a flock of sheep, she jumped upon them. She died in the effort, and a little baby lion was born, nonetheless. It was taken care of by the sheep, and the sheep brought it up, and it grew up with them, ate grass, and bleated like the sheep. And although in time it became a big, full-grown lion, it thought it was a sheep. One day, another lion came in search of prey and was astonished to find that in the midst of this flock of sheep was a lion, fleeing like the sheep at the approach of danger. He tried to get near the sheep lion to tell it that it was not a sheep, but a lion, but the poor animal fled at his approach. However, he watched his opportunity and one day found the sheep lion sleeping. He approached it and said, "You are a lion." "I am a sheep," cried the other lion, and could not believe the contrary, but bleated. The lion dragged him towards a lake and said, "Look, here is my reflection and yours." Then came the comparison. It looked at the lion and at its own reflection, and in a moment came the idea that it was a lion. The lion roared. The bleating was gone. You are lions. You are souls, pure, infinite, and perfect. The might of the universe is within you. Why weepest thou, my friend? There is neither birth nor death for thee. Why weepest thou? There is no disease nor misery for thee. But thou art like the infinite sky, Clouds of various colors come over it, play for a moment, then vanish, but the sky is ever the same, eternal blue. Why do we see wickedness? There was a stump of a tree, and in the dark, a thief came that way and said, "Oh, that is a policeman." A young man waiting for his beloved saw it and thought it was his sweetheart. A child who had been told ghost stories took it for a ghost and began to shriek. But all the time it was the stump of a tree. We see the world as we are. Suppose there is a baby in a room with a bag of gold on the table and a thief comes and steals the gold. Would the baby know it was stolen? That which we have inside, we see outside. The baby has no thief inside and sees no thief outside. So with all knowledge, do not talk of the wickedness of the world and its sins. Weep that you are bound to see wickedness yet. Weep that you are bound to see sin everywhere. And if you want to help the world, do not condemn it. Do not weaken it more. For what is sin and what is misery? And what are all these but the result of weakness? The world is made weaker and weaker every day by such teachings. Men are taught from childhood that they are weak and sinners. Teach them that they are all glorious children of immortality, even those who are the weakest in manifestation. Let positive, strong, helpful thought enter into their brains from very childhood. Lay yourselves open to these thoughts and not to the weakening and paralyzing ones. Lay yourself open to these thoughts and not to weakening and paralyzing ones. Say to your own minds, I am he, I am he. Let it ring day and night in your minds like a song. And at the moment of death, declare, I am he. That is the truth. That is the infinite. That is the truth. The infinite strength of the world is yours. Drive out the superstition that has covered your minds. Let us be brave. Know the truth and practice the truth. The goal may be distant, but awake arise and stop not till the goal is reached. That's the end of the talk. And we have most of the hour yet to go. What I'd like to do is I'd like to spend that time talking with you and hearing your thoughts and your reflections on what the Swami just called to us. Remember, as I said, the Swami had just a few months before been in the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. These truths that he is declaring to us, these truths that he is offering us, are not something he learned from the Upanishads, from the Gita, even from Sri Ramakrishna. He knew it from his own realization. And so he is calling to us to practice the truth. And this is not a new message. This is not a new message. It's the message that we find in the Upanishads. It's the message we find in the Gita. It's the message we find in the teachings of Jesus Christ. Know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. These are not new thoughts, but they are so powerfully expressed. That is the truth. The infinite strength of the world is yours. Drive out the superstition that has covered your minds. Let us be brave, know the truth, and practice the truth. The goal may be distant, but arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. So let us now practice the art of spirituality together. We've been studying this now for some weeks, and the Swami has offered us a great definition. He's argued that we must not be persuaded by the argument of utility, that to be a drone, a producer and consumer, measuring everything by money, by gain, by possessions, is just illusion. Anything from any of you. Please, let's have a discussion. Let's spend the rest of the time this evening together talking about what the Swami said.
Brother Shankara, I like that lion and the sheep-raised lion, baby lion. That story is amazing story.
Isn't that a beautiful story?
It's been part of our life at the dining table. You know, I always talk to them about the lion and the little baby sheep, and they love it. They love that story. How I have an adopted child who doesn't look like any one of us. So I know he has questions and he's already raising. We will be going through that. This story really helps us a lot.
Actually, Haima, I like that story so much that when my daughter was in the single digits, I used it for a puppet show that I did on her birthday, but I replaced the lion with the dragon because we had a lot of dragon puppets. But it was pretty much the same story.
Oh, that's wonderful. Maybe I'll have to create puppets like that and do that with my grandkids. Thank you.
Yes, to do a puppet show. You know, we actually, in Hollywood, we had one of the people who was on Little House on the Prairie, a woman who played a role in Little House on the Prairie, was Swami Swahananda's disciple.
Oh, how nice.
And she organized a little drama company, and we enacted that story, both for the children in Hollywood and also up at the Trabuco Monastery. It was a lot of fun, and the children loved it. They just laughed and applauded when the lion sheep realized it was a lion.
Yeah, it's a great story for kids. The kids loved it at the puppet show too. They loved it. They ate it up.
Sure they did. But now, the point of the story is a profound one. Yes, Brahmadas.
Yeah, moving on. Now, when the Swami says, let positive, strong, helpful thought enter your brains from very childhood, lay yourselves open to these thoughts and not to weakening and paralyzing ones. Say to your own minds, I am he, I am he. That actually reminded me of some words from the Dhammapada of the Buddha. I'll show it to you. Here's the Dhammapada. And he opens with, our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. And there's also a movie now on Netflix called The Secret, which allays to that the power of our minds. And if you can learn to control your mind, you can actually direct your life much more powerfully. So this certainly echoes that.
Well, this is the great teachings of Patanjali. If you can learn to control your attention, your mind, you can control your life force. It is an article of a principle of work by the yogis, that where your attention goes, your prana goes, your life force goes. And as the Swami says here to us, that force is illimitable. That's why pranayama in the hands of someone who doesn't know what they're doing is so dangerous. You can burn your nervous system by incautiously directing that life force and concentrating that life force.
Right, right. Unguided, it's like giving dynamite to children, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Or more than, it's more like giving live electric wires to children. Because our life force is it can be analogized to electricity. It's flowing through us and animating us. This is a dead thing without it. And so in the hands of a master electrician, electricity is truly magical. We heard the story of Tesla. And he was a master electrician indeed of his time. In the hands of a master electrician, electricity is amazing.
And Nikola Tesla, did he meet Swami Vivekananda?
Oh yes, they were
So he
friends.
was under his influence. Okay, so that
They
would
were
explain some of
friends,
his
and
genius.
Vivekananda is the one who told Tesla to do what Einstein ultimately did, and that is prove that matter and energy were the same thing. That's exactly what EMC squared means. Energy and matter are the same thing in two different forms, at two different rates of vibration. MC squared means matter times the speed of light squared, which is a vibratory rate, very fast vibratory rate. So yes, they were friends. So anything else about what the Swami has called to us, called across the years to us?
Brother Shankara? Go ahead.
Yes. Who spoke? Divya?
Oh,
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll go after you.
thank you. When I hear these last few passages, it makes me think that he's talking about the ultimate reality. Like he's saying that we're not who we think we are, that we're actually more than that. And it seems like he's pointing toward that, the I amness of consciousness in these last few passages.
You're absolutely right, Dennis. That's what he's doing. As a matter of fact, one of the talks coming up is titled The Real and the Apparent Man, which takes those thoughts that you just enunciated, that you just framed, and gives a long and very persuasive talk. As a matter of fact, it was that talk in 1975 that caused me to jump up from the table and just say, yes, 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 finally something that makes sense. And it was a gorgeous moment. I can remember it to right now. So yes, you're exactly right. That's what he's saying. That we are definitely not what we have been taught we are. Partly we teach ourselves, partly it's the primordial ignorance that is shared by the Maya, the primordial ignorance. Nobody's to blame. The primordial ignorance is shared by people who believe in it with children. And Vivekananda is saying, stop sharing that with the children, start sharing the truth with the children. And which is beautifully enunciated, beautifully spelled out in a book called Island, just the word island, by Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley wrote a book. It's a book of fiction in which he, in part, talks about what children should first be taught, rather than any of the facts of the world. They should be taught about the fact that they have an imagination and allowed to develop that imagination, and along with that, teach them the power of cooperation, the power of more than one human being working with another. So the power of imagination and cooperation are the first two things that children should learn. So thank you, Dennis. You hit the nail right on the head. I don't know if it's the next talk or I just don't remember whether it's the next talk in the series, but the title of the talk will be The Real and the Apparent Man. Divya, you had something.
Yes, I did, Brother Shankara. I was thinking about the part about wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
And how we see the world in terms of this good and evil, the binary, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But everything in our society is organized in terms of this idea that we have to see the sin.
Mm-hmm.
And in Christianity, you know, it's this constant idea that I am a sinner, which is, I mean, I think in some ways well intended. And I think of Swamiji reading Thomas A. Kempis's Imitation of Christ, wherein he says, you know, always think of yourself as nothing, you know, in a way that is intended to make you remember that you are, you know, that vanity is its own veil. But that
Good
being
word.
said, I, you know, just this whole idea that, you know, it is not fitting that we think of ourselves as sinners, as Sri Krishna says
Mm-hmm.
in the Gita,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't build a base from the idea that you are impure.
Mm-hmm.
But everything around us tells us that. From day one in school, if you do badly on a test, you get an F. I'm a
Yeah.
teacher. So it's like I always struggled with grading my students, for example, because I'm like, why? You know, I mean, I can tell you if you, you know, got a grasp of the idea or not, but I'm not going to punish you because it didn't make sense that first time round.
Oh, thank you, Divya. That's exactly right. How horrible our education system is in that way. And that it, you know, you get a gold star or you get an F. And oh my God, what
Yeah,
torment it is for the children.
it is a torment, but it's not just, I mean, it's our whole way of being in the world. It's this idea that you punish the wicked.
Mm-hmm.
But to see the wickedness, you have to have it in you too.
Well, that's exactly what the Swami said in that story of the baby in the room with a bag of gold, and someone comes and takes the gold. The baby doesn't see a thief
Yep.
because there's no idea of thief. There's no idea of stealing in the child. But you know, in the Chandi, where the hymns to the mother point out that she is not only the great Devi but the great Asuri. She loves every tiny aspect of her creation. And it says, don't you, addressing the mother, don't you destroy Asuras by mere sight, but you direct your weapons against them, so that even the inimical ones, purified by the missiles, may attain the higher worlds. Such is your most kindly intention toward them. So, if we are to mirror the reality, we will mirror that idea. It doesn't mean that we condone antisocial activities, that those things that harm others. No, people must be curbed from doing that. But this idea of that it is right and just to punish the wicked, mother destroys their ability to do their wickedness. It says also in one of the Chandi hymns, Mother, it is your nature to subdue the conduct of the wicked. This your peerless beauty is inconceivable for others. But this idea that it is our power, that we must punish the wicked. We must curb their ability to harm others and be antisocial. But it's vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
Yes. And, you know, if we exact vengeance, we're only hurting ourselves.
Exactly. Judge
And
not, lest ye be judged.
and remove the plank from thine own eye.
Mhm.
And it's just, I mean, on that note, it's, how can you change someone? Like, I think a child, makes a mistake, even does something like steal or lie to you,
Mhm.
or, something far more ignorant.
Mhm.
You don't change them by telling them over and over again, you're a sinner, that's a sin, you're a bad person,
Mhm.
because chances are they did it because they thought they were that. But
Or
like
they did it out of sheer ignorance. They did it out of or just they were mistaken.
they're
It used to
mistaken.
drive Sri Ramakrishna just crazy when he heard about when people would read the Christian scriptures to him, and even when the Brahmo Samaj did it because of their imitation of certain Christian habits. The Brahmo Samaj was was at the time that Sri Ramakrishna was alive, headed by Keshav Sen, and they would go on about sin. And Sri Ramakrishna said, no, 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 don't do that. The more you think about sin, the more you will become a sinner. Don't think, and it's just exactly what the Swami said here. Replace those lower thoughts with higher thoughts. Do not allow yourselves to be trapped into thinking that you are bad, wrong, impure. No.
Like, for example, in some Orthodox, and this was even true in the 19th century, in some Orthodox Hindu communities, it is, and even I was taught this as a child, you are not allowed to go to the temple when you're menstruating,
Mm-hmm.
because you are impure, And even the Devi temple, and I actually had a long conversation with my mother about it, because I was, and then come to find out, Sri Ramakrishna, and using the idea of impurity and menstruation as an example, he said, why? What does this decretion say about the purity of your mind?
Exactly.
And that just goes back to seeing the wickedness. It's when people feel the need to control a woman through that way of thinking, that social norm comes about. Just like I
Yes,
guess I could, yeah, sorry,
it
go ahead.
makes the patriarchy uncomfortable. It's wrong. Therefore, it's forbidden.
Well, even
So it's just nonsense. But nevertheless, there it is.
yes, it is.
And so the crux for us is not to judge others, but to change ourselves. As we change, the universe changes. And, even the quantum physicists are coming to grasp this. Even the quantum physicists are beginning to say, does consciousness pervade the universe? Because they see that the observer changes the outcome of their experiments. How? When that first was discovered, it was absolutely such a revolutionary idea, and only people like Schrödinger and Planck and a few others were willing to countenance it. So now, but what Swamiji said was so. Now you'll have to forgive the masculine pronoun, because that's the way it was when Goethe wrote. But this is what Goethe said. A man sees in the world what he carries in his heart. And so when we change what we carry in our hearts, the world changes for us. That's what the Swami just got through telling us. Know the truth, practice the truth.
yes.
And he admits the goal may be distant. Well, distant is a very relative thing, as Einstein pointed out. Distance and time are a very relative thing. We think 40 years is a long time. It's not even considerable as a length of time if you consider the age of the universe. You can't even make a mark on the paper small enough to represent it. So for us to begin now with the idea that, oh, well, it may take me 40 years. Well and good. Well and good. Anyone else, please?
Yes, I'd like to read something.
Please, Robert, what would you like to read?
To share with the group. I think it's appropriate here. It goes, so it's this. Light alone dispels darkness. It is wisdom alone that destroys ignorance and gives freedom. Knowledge or wisdom is of two kinds, lower and higher. The lower is called jnana. The higher is called vijnana. To know a thing in theory only is called jnana. And to carry the theory into practice and to come face to face with the facts is known as vijnana. The mind has four faculties: willing, feeling, thinking, and gathering. And to suit these four faculties, we have four different paths: work, which is karma yoga; worship, which is bhakti yoga; philosophy, which is jnana yoga; and psychic control, which is raja yoga. It is the impurities of the mind that bind a man. When the heart becomes pure and the mind is one-pointed, one attains samadhi, or freedom. One can make the heart pure and the mind one-pointed, either by selfless work, work for work's sake, or by pure devotion, or by discrimination and dispassion, or by psychic control, and thus attain wisdom or moksha. I may have slaughtered some of those Indian words I have problems with, but it's from this book,
Which is,
Revelation.
please tell us, because I can't read it, for example.
By Swami Narayananda.
Narayananda, yeah.
Narayana, okay. Revelation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, this is all of what was said was true. And when you were reading it, I was thinking, is this from Swami's Raja Yoga? Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga? It could easily, because he said those same thoughts in his own way.
Yes, that sounded very familiar to me too. I thought,
But but it doesn't matter who says it or in what context they've said it. It's absolutely true. And so it's up to us to decide, along with a teacher, if we choose to seek a teacher, it's up to us to decide what path, which of those paths to follow. But notice that it was said, the impurities of the mind. It's only the left brain that contains these impurities, and is because it is in this age it is so predominant and valued so much that we ignore, as Einstein said, the left mind is the servant, the right mind is the genius. We have built a society that honors the servant and ignores the genius. Jill Bolte Taylor, this incredible woman who is a neuroanatomist, still teaching. You can find her work online. She works in part through an organization called #Stroke of Genius. She was, all of her left mind was simply taken offline by a huge stroke. She was left with only her right mind consciousness, which she wasn't aware was there. And it is pure. That is the seat of our being. This left mind, as Einstein characterized it, is the servant. And so we must learn to, as Sri Ramakrishna put it, make that left mind behave like a shy child. Be the servant. He said, if you have to have this mind, Sri Ramakrishna said, and he characterized it as the ego, because that's the seat of the ego, this misapprehension. He said, if you have to have that ego, then let that rascal be a servant. And how do we treat a servant? As Divya was pointing out earlier, you don't beat the servant over the head with their mistakes. You don't tell them, what's wrong with you? No, you say, no, dear, this is how it's done. This is the way. This is the way. No, that isn't, again, this isn't it. And you honor them in the sense of you care for them, you give them proper clothing, you give them a proper place to live, so to speak. You give them all of the things that they need so that they can serve well. But you don't put them in charge of the house. Thank you, Robert. That was very appropriate what you read.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
I think for me, sometimes thinking about my place in the vastness of the universe
Mhm.
is actually not making me feel insignificant, but it liberates me and it's exhilarating. One of my
Yes.
best experiences was when we went to this planetarium a couple of years ago in Boston,
Mhm.
and it takes us from our little place on the earth and through all these different um, zones and galaxies and billions of stars, and then it sort of brings us back, and it was just amazing. And it just feels, I mean, to me, again, when I think about it, there's so much scope there. I mean, this is just a small piece of the experience. And I read that we're all made of the same essence,
Mhm.
and we are all just points of perspective in universal being. And that's what I feel when I think about this vastness of the universe.
That's that what you just said, point of perspective in this universal being that you are, but that you have as is this embodied aspect. You have this point of perspective in this infinitude. This is the message of Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he says, don't take it so seriously. It's like a pencil point, constantly moving, constantly drawing a reality for you. But that's all. The reality that it draws is limited. The power that is behind that perspective, that pencil point, that's who you are. That's who you are. And that's exactly what Swami Vivekananda was saying. Don't think of yourself as a little being that comes and goes, that is born and dies. Krishna is so explicit about this in chapter 2 of the Gita. I can't recommend highly enough to any of us, including me, to read over and over again chapters 2 through 6 of the Gita. I mean, Krishna just explains it all. He just gives the whole, the whole Megillah, as they say in Yiddish. It's all there. And of course, we can also, to our great prophet, every day read the Katamrita. And if we read Bengali, wonderful, read it in Bengali as the Katamrita, or read it as the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. For example, December 27th, I'm going to give a talk on the transformation of Scrooge, this wonderful story by Charles Dickens about Ebenezer Scrooge and what happens to him in one night. And I was trying to think how to explain how this is possible. And in the gospel, was it yesterday morning, a very recent morning, I found the perfect explanation, the exact explanation for how it happens by Sri Ramakrishna. In Sri Ramakrishna's terms, in Sanskrit, Scrooge is a Kripasida. transformed by grace, all of a sudden, in an instant. As Sri Ramakrishna says, a dark room is when a match is struck in that dark room, a lamp is lit in that dark room, the darkness does not vanish little by little. It disappears all at once. And this is what happened to Scrooge. And as the time comes toward the December 27th, there'll be a link to the movie Scrooge, the 1951. I'm digressing, but in any event, there's so much to be found in the Katamrita, in Sri Ramakrishna's gospel. Anything else on any of these thoughts?
What does Megillah mean?
Oh, it means the whole thing. The Megillah. I don't know the exact translation, but it means the entire thing, from beginning to end. Yeah, you can. Billy Crystal uses it in some of his routines, where he's talking about his grandparents who spoke Yiddish.
You know, I had a question about the left mind and the right mind, because
Yes.
so much of that binary I wonder about, because is it really the mind so much as our association of the mind, which is the soul? That's that sense of the infinite amidst the sense of the finite. The mind is finite. You know, it has a limit. I mean, it wouldn't exist without a body. Though our soul consciousness is that prana, which remains even without a mind. Then
Well, not exactly. The subtle body contains the mind, but not the personality of the mind.
Yes, because the personality will be varied based on the birth you take, which
Right.
is, I suppose, contingent on your past action and your present action, because your mind is constantly changing based on whatever action you do in that lifetime. I always think of Mother, Holy Mother, when she said, you know, there's this one line where one part of her gospel where she says, I used to listen to a flute player in when she was at Dakshineshwar, and she said, what a wonderful mind I had then. And it's this idea that your mind is never one. Well, it is one, but it's never the same. It's just this, mind is a change and the body is a change. And you know, the mind you had 5 years ago is not the same mind you have now. So
Well, the Buddha
like,
is the mind you had a moment ago is not the mind.
absolutely. So then it just, I mean, you know, when I think of the left and the right, I think of music all the time, because you know, music is like, and I think of certain kinds of music like jazz, which is not like rhythmical necessarily. And it's not regular in the sense of, like, you know, a certain number of beats. It could be free form. And so then, you know, it's left and it's right. at the same time, because I mean, it's left being logic and right being, creative. It's
Well,
just
the
hard
creative
for me.
the creative impulse, according to yoga psychology, the creative impulse comes from the heart. It comes from what, and it is then the left mind is the artisan. The art comes from the heart, the shaping of it, so that it becomes accessible to others, is through the left mind. And so there's the definition of the left mind, of the mind, that Robert Ayres read earlier, and its 4 or 5 capabilities. And then there's, and that is more reflective of the yoga psychology way of looking at things. And then there is the neuroanatomical way of looking at the mind and its relationship to the world, and that is what's reflected by Jill Bolte Taylor. And you just talked about the mind changing. The mind, according to Jill Bolte Taylor, this is what she calls neuroplasticity, the ability of the mind to be just directly affected by your intentions. She says that the mind is making, the neurons are making 1.8 million new connections per minute. 1.8 million new connections per minute. And she says this is why if you do something earnestly and continuously, regularly for 21 days, it will make an incredible difference, because the mind will deliberately change itself according to your intentions. As I say, you can hear her talk about this. You go on YouTube and put in hashtag stroke of genius. And it's an organization of stroke people who have lived past and through and recovered from strokes. And she's one of course, the leaders of that organization, one of the principal people. But it's led by a woman who's a supermodel, and she's really quite remarkable herself.
I will. Thank you. My friend just passed away from a stroke.
I'm so sorry, dear. How old?
He was he's probably in his late 70s.
Uh-huh.
Um,
That's the time. I am on alert by my allopathic doctors and taking medications precisely to reduce the possibility of such an event. So I hope he had a wonderful life, and of course he's gone on to something wonderful, no doubt.
yes, he really did live a rich life.
Good. Anything else from anyone? This has been sweet. Let's talk. And thank you, Robert, for reading what you read. That was very, very appropriate. And Divya, you brought up Thomas à Kempis's The Imitation of Christ, which of course was, excuse me, when Swami Vivekananda, after Sri Ramakrishna's Mahasamadhi, Swami Vivekananda spent some time wandering in India. He took 2 books with him, the Gita and Thomas à Kempis's The Imitation of Christ. I don't don't know what brought that on, but nevertheless, there it is. So anything else? And thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
And Dennis, thank you for your contribution. Ramadas, everyone who's contributed, thank you. Anything at all from anyone else? A question, a comment?
A little bit of a conflict here. See, the Swami is emphasizing that we see the world as we are. If we see the world as a dirty place, that's kind of what we see in ourselves and so forth. Yeah, I've read Thomas à Kempis's The Imitation of Christ, and he repeatedly says this miserable world, and some of that effect in it. And
Well, so does, Walt Whitman was once accused by someone of contradicting himself. That in that wonderful book, Leaves of Grass, he says one thing in one poem and says something else, diametrically the opposite in another. And rather than argue with the man, this was Whitman's response. I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I contain multitudes. And so, and that is true of each of us. Swami Vivekananda, on occasion, says that this world, this experience we're having of this world, is a Tantalus's hell. For those of you who know the mythology of Tantalus, it was just always just out of reach. And, happiness, success, whatever, Tantalus.
yeah, I tend to agree with the Swami on that one.
Well, but it's one thing to think of the world in such a way, but how do you think of yourself? You are not the world. You are experiencing the world. What were you about to say, Robert?
I'd like to share something about that. Both negative and positive are very necessary.
Yes.
Some lessons cannot be learned only coming from a positive point of view. And some lessons cannot be learned coming only from a negative point of view. And that's the reason that we call it good and bad. I like to call it positive and negative, because that negative, or the things that we call bad, we learn some very profound lessons from that. And when we learn a lesson coming from that position, we learn it very well.
Yes.
See, it goes back to the old saying they tell you when you're a kid, don't touch that stove, it'll burn you. You see, you can tell one burn, they never, ever, ever will do it again. So that lesson is learned very profoundly from a negative experience.
And you're so right, Robert. And the thing for us to keep in mind, rather than focusing on the pain of those negative lessons when they happen, is that I am sitting here on a Tuesday evening studying all of this wonderful thought of Swami Vivekananda because of everything that happened to me.
Yeah.
Everything that happened brought me to this moment. Not just according to the yoga philosophy, not just everything that happened to me personally, but everything that happened in the universe itself brought me to this moment. And we see this beautifully reflected in the poems of the saints, whose poems are in that book, Love Poems from God. They say, I kiss those hands that beat me. because of just what you said, Robert. Thank you very much for bringing that out.
Yes.
Anything else from anyone? All right. Well, it is a little after 9 o'clock. Here is a primer on what Sri Ramakrishna says is the most effective way to move forward to this realization of I am He in this time. And it's called Chaitanya's prayer. I won't say all of it, but I will say up to a certain point. Chant the name of the Lord and His glory. This is what Sri Ramakrishna says. This is the way, he says, for this time in the Kali Yuga. Chant the name of the Lord and His glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. O name, stream down in moonlight on the lotus heart, opening its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drown deep in the waves of his bliss, chanting his name continually, tasting his nectar at every step, bathing in his name, that bath for weary souls. Various are thy names, O Lord. In each and every name thy power resides. No times are set, no rites are needful for chanting of thy name, so vast is thy mercy. How huge then is my wretchedness, who find in this empty life and heart no devotion to thy name. O my mind, be humbler than a blade of grass. Be patient and forbearing like the tree. Take no honor to thyself. Give honor to all. Chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. O Lord and soul of the universe, mine is no prayer for wealth or retinue, the playthings of lust or the toys of fame. As many times as I may be reborn, grant me, O Lord, a steadfast love for thee. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. And in our loving salutation of the Mother, Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May you go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. So until next time, which for those of us who decide to join us will be Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, when we'll talk about Swami Prabhavananda's, one of the talks in Swami Prabhavananda's collection of talks called Realizing God. And then on Sunday morning, we'll start our study of Jnana Yoga, which is what we're going to study in December. And I'm very much looking forward to offering you that talk on the transformation of Scrooge. That is one of my all-time favorite pastimes at Christmas is to watch that film, Scrooge, the 1951 black and white version, starring Alistair Sim. And if you don't otherwise find it for yourself, and I'm not saying you should, it's just a great enjoyment. It's such a wonderfully told story by Charles Dickens. But in the week or two before the talk, there will be a link for you to find that film if you want it.
It's
So
on YouTube, Brother Shankara.
say it again, dear.
Full movie of Charles Dickens is on YouTube.
Okay.
Entire movie is there. I saw that one.
Yes, it's there.
Yes.
We'll make sure that the link is to a very high def version, very clean high def version without commercials and so on. So anything else from anyone before we close? Okay. So sweet to have been with you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Beautiful
Good night. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Hari Om.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.